Hey guys, my name is Jack, I make videos about all things tech, and while I'm working on my review for the 15 Pro Max, I thought that it'd be kind of fun to take a bit of a look back at the original iPhone. I've got a really cool art piece to show you today that, if you're a bit of a geek like me, I think you're really going to like this. I just bought this from Grid Studio. If you've not heard of them, they basically take older devices and tech and then deconstruct them and create these sort of pieces of history of art that you can hang up on your wall, which not only look pretty sweet, but also means that there's less older devices going into landfill. They do Apple tech, Samsung, even Nokia if you fancy an old 3310. They've even got some older games consoles if you grew up playing those. For iPhones, they do the first iPhone up to the iPhone 10 at the moment. These of course do sort of come and go in and out of stock, especially for the first gen iPhone, as they have to try and source these older devices, and there are only so many of them left, so definitely keep an eye out. Also, they might have some imperfections as these are used bits of gear and they are quite old, but they are meticulously cleaned and put back together into these displays. And yeah, I've been wanting to get my hands on one of these for quite a while and I can't wait to get it unboxed. This is not a sponsored video, but I will link to it below, and you can get 10% off if you use code JCKRGB10 at the checkout when spending $100 or more. And those links help support me and the channel. Steve Jobs famously announced the first iPhone on the 9th of January 2007. And this was probably the most iconic Apple keynote that the company had ever done. It is highly worth a watch if you've never seen it. Just for some context, back then, most mobile phones were pretty clunky. They either couldn't do much or they were overly complicated and a bit confusing to use. Apple showed off this device that had just a single button on the front and one giant screen. Well, I say that, it was pretty big for its day, but it's laughably small by today's standards. But when Steve first showed navigating a list with a flick of a finger with the inertial scrolling and sort of the elastic rubber banding, the people in the audience went crazy because they had never seen anything like that before on a phone. Smartphones went from mostly being BlackBerry clones to all having full-on touchscreens and full-screen apps. It really kind of changed the game. That was over 16 years ago now, and I'm guessing that there aren't that many working first-gen iPhones still out there. I'd love to get my hands on one and maybe do a comparison between the original iPhone and, with the latest version. I think that'd be interesting to see how far we've come. I never got to own the original. The closest I had was I had the first-gen iPod Touch, which launched shortly afterwards, and I loved that thing. My actual first iPhone was the iPhone 3G. Let me know what your first was in the comments. But yeah, enough of me waffling on. Let's just get this thing unboxed. On the front, we've got some Grid branding and some shiny text. It says, Grid marks Apple's entry into the cellular phone market, described by Steve Jobs as a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. Then underneath, there's quite a famous quote from Steve Jobs that reads, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." So let's take a look inside and see what we get. Okay, so we've got some nice cool artwork here. We've got, I believe this is the original Macintosh or maybe the Apple One. We've got the iPhone, Apple Watch, and an iPad as well. Then I've got a little envelope here. Every classic deserves to be framed, from Grid Studio. We've got on top what looks like a timeline of the original iPhone starting from 2007 going all the way up to 2022. I actually ordered this just before the iPhone 15 launch, so I'm guessing they've probably updated it by now. Then we've got some cards and it reads, "It has been more than 14 years since the original iPhone was released, and in order to pay tribute to the iPhone and its creator, Steve Jobs, we're giving you a chance to win a limited edition iPhone artwork." That's pretty cool. Please help support us by sharing our artwork with your friends and family. And then there's a QR code you can scan for a chance to win a limited edition framed iPhone. And then we have a photo of one of these being put together, and I believe these are all put together by hand, which must take quite a long time. So over to the actual display itself. Oh wow, and there it is. The original iPhone deconstructed and laid out into this really cool sort of display case. So first impressions, that is a remarkably clean looking iPhone case. I mean, I was expecting it to be a bit more beat up than that, but that looks like a phone that's never been used. So That is really nice. I'll just give you a closer look. The design of the original iPhone itself is pretty, iconic. It had the aluminium top part and then the lower part was made from plastic. That was like a little window to let all of the sort of radio signals get out from. And just to show you the back, we have 4 hooks in each corner that you can hook onto a screw or something. So we'll just take a little bit of a look around, and I'm going to use an Apple Pencil just so I can point to stuff. And it says introduced in June 2007. That was when you could actually buy the iPhone for the first time. And it says Apple reinvents the phone. And we've got all of these, component parts laid out. We've got the power button, the mute switch, which, funny enough, has gone now on the iPhone. That's been replaced with the action button. Every iPhone from the original to the 14 had a mute switch, and now they don't. This is the SIM tray, and if you're wondering why it's so massive, back then, SIMs were actually really big. They then, at some point, they switched to micro SIM and then nano SIM, which we have now. But if you buy an iPhone, 14 or 15 in the US, it doesn't have a SIM tray at all. But here in the UK and Europe, we do still have one, and it's sort of a lot smaller than this. But yeah, back then, SIM cards were actually massive. We've got the earpiece that is, at the top of the phone. The vibration motor. The iPhone now has a haptic motor for a much more satisfying sort of feeling when you get a notification. And then over here, we've got the main board, the CPU, the brain of the computer. And this was way before Apple had started making their own chips. In fact, I've got a little sort of spec comparison open with the newest iPhone 15. This is a 412 megahertz ARM11 processor. I think it was just a single core back then. Then compared with something like the iPhone 15, this actually has 6 cores. It has 2 at 3.78 gigahertz and 4 at 2.11, as it has some efficiency cores and some performance cores as well. So a absolutely huge leap in performance from the original iPhone to the newest 15. Then over here, we've got the front glass. And again, that is remarkably sort of clean. I was expecting it maybe to, have a crack in it or something, if it was a phone that someone had used, if someone had dropped it. But no, it just looks immaculate. Up until the iPhone 4S, the iPhone had a 3.5-inch display. And just to sort of compare that to a 15 Pro Max, it is, that's smaller than the iPhone mini that lots of people loved as well. And I came across something the other day which I thought was really interesting. The resolution on the original iPhone was 320 by 480 pixels. That's compared to 1290 by 2796 on the Pro Max. That means that the entire screen on the original iPhone is about the same as 2 icons on the latest one. We also have the home button down here, which itself was quite iconic, and that of course is no longer with us. Rest in peace, home button. Since the iPhone 10, we've just been living our best lives with our full screen on the front of the device. The only iPhone that is still sold that has a home button is the SE, and that's the 3rd generation SE, and I imagine that with the 4th gen, it will disappear as well. Now, we also have to talk about the cameras, because I think this is sort of one of the biggest areas that has changed in smartphones over the years, that has had the biggest upgrades. This here is the original camera module on the first iPhone. And of course, we only had 1 camera on the back then. Now we have 3. We have an ultra-wide, a main camera, and a telephoto. And this camera was incredibly limited. It was a 2 megapixel camera, which even for its day was kind of low for a megapixel count, versus 48 megapixels on the main camera now. And this camera could only take photos. There was no video mode. The camera app itself was really limited. It was literally just a button to capture a photo and a button to look at the photo library. That was literally it. There was no panoramas. There was definitely no portrait mode, no night mode. It was really basic, and yeah, that was literally it. It was just take a picture and you're done. No real computational photography stuff, which accounts for a lot of the improvements that we've seen in recent years on smartphone cameras. Yeah, it was just incredibly basic. It would be really fun to sort of see some actual photos from both of these side by side and see how they actually compare. And also, just while we're on the subject of cameras, the original iPhone didn't have a front-facing camera. We didn't get that until the iPhone 4. So there was no FaceTime, no video calling. If you wanted to get in touch with someone, you had to either call them, which, who phones people, or send them a text message. And we didn't even have picture messaging on the first iPhone. There was no iMessage. It was literally just basic text. Like, imagine buying a phone today and it didn't have a front camera. Like, you wouldn't buy it. Is someone doing that? There's got to be someone out there. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I'm sure there's got to be a phone maker out there that makes like a front cameraless phone. Then down here on the bottom right, we've got sort of the main sort of chassis, I guess, of the phone with the cutouts, various bits that would hold everything together. And then over here we have the charge connector, the dock connector it was called. And this thing, God, I remember this thing was so big and the cable for it was like, the connector was so wide. And then of course they switched to Lightning with the iPhone 5. And then just this year we have finally switched to USB-C on the 15 series. Here we have the display connector connected to the light sensor. And that was another thing that was really unique about the iPhone. I mean, not many phones had it at the time, but yeah, the iPhone had an ambient light sensor that could detect the brightness of the conditions around you and then dim the display as needed. It also had the proximity sensor that shut off the display as you sort of brought it up to your ear so you didn't accidentally end a call with your side of your face. And even stuff like the accelerometer, which detects when you rotate the phone and, rotates a photo as well for you. And back then, these things just weren't in phones. And the first time that Steve turned that phone into landscape in that keynote, people, lost their minds because they'd just never seen anything like it. And we take all of these things for granted now, but phones were really basic back then. Now, there is one thing that is missing from this that you might have noticed, and that is the battery. And that would have been the biggest thing that was in the original iPhone. And I'm guessing the reason it's not here is it's probably not safe to have a 16-year-old battery sitting in a display case. As batteries get old, they degrade, and they are prone to sort of expanding and potentially becoming dangerous. So if you're wondering why there's no battery, I'm guessing that's probably the reason. So that is the original iPhone deconstructed into all its component parts. I think this just looks so cool, and I've wanted to get one of these for so long. Really impressed with just the whole presentation and the unboxing experience. I never got to own the original iPhone, but this is the next best thing. And if you're a bit of a tech geek like me and you want a piece of history to hang on your wall, then these are well worth checking out. And you know what? I think this would make a really great gift. Remember, you can get 10% off with code JCKRGB10 at the checkout for orders over $100. And they don't just have Apple stuff, so go take a look. You might find something that you're really nostalgic for, something that really means something to you. Let me know if you'd like to see another unboxing from Grid Studio and tell me what device you'd like to see. I'd gladly do another. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. And if you want to see my 15 Pro Max review, then get subscribed and hit the bell to be the first to see that when it's posted. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.